This is one of the things that happens when you run for president. You lose your eyesight. And they told me I could get to 50 without it, but it didn't work. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Esther, for your kind introduction. I obviously want to thank Jonathan Greenblatt and your national chair, Marvin Nathan, and all of you for inviting me to be a part of this leadership summit. I'm truly honored to be here. I also see that Jay Johnson is here to be recognized in a moment. Thank you for your service to our country. And we're very grateful. Thank you. So, at the heart of many of the debates we're having in American politics, and I think in the broader society, is the question of what America is. And it goes to the heart of hate crimes and people. And I think I've always talked about, you heard a little bit in the introduction, one of the things that makes America unique from so many other nations on earth is that ours is not a nation built on blood and on soil. Meaning ours is not a nation where we simply identify ourselves as Americans based on where we were born or who we were born to. What I think has made America so unique is it is a nation built on an idea, an extraordinarily powerful and at the time revolutionary idea when first enunciated. And that is the idea that every single human being is born with the rights to life, to liberty, to pursue happiness as they see it. In essence, that every single human being has inherent rights given to them by their Creator, and that the job of government is to protect them, not to deny them and not to decide them. And that, today, we take for granted, but it is in fact unique in the history of the world. I would go on to say that in the founding documents of this nation, it did not say that those were rights inherent to the people born in North America. It said these are the rights of all men, which by that meant all people. And the question before us today on multiple policy before our nation and before our society is whether that is still true and whether in fact that remains the unifying theme and cause of America. In recent months, we have seen that challenged. We've seen it challenged here at home. The Jewish student in Georgia who received a note from another student that contained a swastika and the phrase, "Hitler did the world a favor." At the City College of New York, an area where Jews meet for prayer, it was defaced with graffiti that read, "Jews are pests. Hitler was right to kill them all." Sadly, in my home state of Florida, swastikas were drawn on the sidewalks of 3 synagogues on the same day. And on a personal note, and we've shared this with Jonathan and others, my wife, because she is involved in a number of causes, and of course being my wife, received a very disturbing voicemail from someone we don't know. And the most disturbing part of this voicemail, which we played for them, it was hate-filled and so forth, was the calmness in which that hateful message was delivered. I'm not saying it would have been better, I'm just saying it would have probably been less chilling if the person who left that voicemail was angry and screaming and using profanity. This person was making this argument as if it was a legitimate and credible political thought. And without giving it credence by going into its contents, suffice it to say it was not just eye-opening, but chilling to believe that there are people in our country who not just hold these views, but are prepared to enunciate them without hiding their first name, their last name, where they live, or where they are. Obviously, we're all familiar with the JCC threats. In response to those threats, I'm proud that in March, all 100 senators urged the Attorney General, the Homeland Security Secretary, the FBI Director, to make sure that we're protecting these centers as a priority and to find and ultimately to prosecute those responsible. The fact, by the way, that every single member of the Senate joined in that effort, I think is proof that this issue need not be, should not be, and has historically not been a partisan one. And so, in continuation to that, I believe that as we enter this budget process and make decisions in Congress, that it's crucial that our Department of Justice and Homeland Security have the resources to help Jewish community centers improve their physical security and to deter threats, and have the ability to work with local law enforcement to investigate and to prosecute these anonymous cowards who are spreading fear and anxiety, often impacting the lives of young children who rely on these centers for after-school activities, not to mention faith activities, and in cases of schools, disrupting their academic day. I was also proud to be a part of a hate crime condemnation resolution because anti-Semitism at the end of the day is part of a larger disturbing trend which is emerging in our society. as it's become more politically polarized in recent years. Hate-based violence and threats are on the rise, with virtually every type of person threatened simply because of who they are. And that includes Arabs, and Muslims, and Hindus, and Sikhs. Last month, I'm proud to have worked with Senator Kamala Harris of California on a bipartisan resolution condemning hate crimes and discrimination and other forms of prejudice against minorities in the United States. And again, I'm proud that the Senate passed that resolution unanimously. But I would say that as we continue to combat these issues here at home, we should not forget that ours is an important voice in the world, and that internationally, we continue to combat hatred and bigotry and continue our efforts to support persecuted people as persecution continues unabated throughout the world. Sometimes we take for granted the fact that we still live in a society where these crimes are prosecuted, where victims can receive justice, and where those responsible for it are not just put in jail, but are societally stigmatized. But in every corner of the globe, there are literally millions of people that are being targeted because of their religion, because of their political beliefs, because of their sexual orientation, or because all of the above. In Iraq, the ancient Christian community is on the verge of extinction because of ISIS. Yazidis and other religious minorities are being targeted. In Russia, reports have exposed the Chechen government's systematic use of torture and violence against members of the gay community and others. In Iran, the regime jails its own citizens simply for exercising their fundamental human rights. The Iranian government consistently targets religious minorities and has jailed Christian pastors who gather to worship in private homes. Of course, the threat of anti-Semitism remains alive, and the world has already witnessed, in less than a century ago, the horrible price to be paid when it is not challenged, no matter where it begins or who it comes from. Threats against the Jewish community are not just a problem in the United States. We have seen, unfortunately, a resurgence of anti-Semitism throughout the globe. It's profoundly concerning to read reports of harassment and violence occurring in Jewish schools and synagogues across the continent of Europe, and even certain governments amplifying their anti-Semitic messages. The United States must work with other nations to combat this evil global phenomenon. We must expose anti-Semitism wherever and wherever we see it. So I introduced the Combating European Anti-Semitism Act of 2017, which would enhance reporting requirements on anti-Semitic incidents in Europe and the annual International Religious Freedom Report that's authored by the State Department. This bipartisan legislation was introduced with Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, and it will ensure that the State Department can better assess and understand the challenges so that we can combat European anti-Semitism in all of its forms. We've also tackled anti-Semitism as a global problem at international forums like the United Nations. We've seen a troubling trend at the UN of consistently singling out Israel and of attacking the Jewish state's legitimacy, and they are outrageous. The United States cannot stand by and allow the sole democracy in the Middle East and one of our strongest allies on the planet to be targeted, discriminated against, or held to a different standard than any other UN member state. Recently, UNESCO member states once again passed a shameful resolution aiming to delegitimize the Jewish state of Israel. This resolution, submitted by Algeria, Egypt, Lebanon, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, and Sudan, attempts to deny any connection between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. These days, as you probably are well aware, it's difficult to find much that everyone can agree on in this city. But the one issue where you will find a united voice on Capitol Hill is on the need to eliminate discriminatory behavior against Israel and international organizations. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware and I recently led a bipartisan effort to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that was signed by all 100 members of the U.S. Senate, urging him to counter the anti-Israel bias at the United Nations. . I recently, in fact, on the day of the letter, spoke with the UN Secretary General about this anti-Israel bias, and he has invited me and other senators to come to New York or to engage us here in Washington, along with our fantastic ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, to discuss and confront this problem. This is an issue I've been working on for some time. In January, Senator Cotton of Arkansas and I introduced the Countering Anti-Semitism and Anti-Israel Activities at the UN. This bill targets UN funding for certain UN agencies until it is certified by the President that these agencies have taken concrete steps to stop promoting anti-Semitism and anti-Israel agenda. In a disturbing echo of Germany's anti-Jewish boycotts of the 1930s, we also see today's boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which engages in economic warfare against the Jewish state. So earlier this year, again in a bipartisan measure, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and I introduced the Combating BDS Act of 2017. And this would support state and local governments in the United States that decide to push back against this movement's economic warfare. The bipartisan letter is co-sponsored by 34 senators, and so far it includes the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, and the Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer. Our bill will create ironclad protections for state and local governments that decide to divest taxpayer money from firms and from financial institutions engaged in commercial or investment-related BDS activities that target Israel. So as you can see on this front, the news is good in the sense that there is a strong bipartisan commitment. Every single one of these measures I just read to you is bipartisan, includes the leadership of both parties, and in many cases enjoys the unanimous support of our members. Perhaps you can help us figure out health care that way. but I think it's good. And I would just close by saying that we do face extraordinary challenges. And the fact that we are gathered here today to discuss them in an open and honest forum with members from both parties and from all political persuasions is a reminder that as many challenges as we face in this country, I'd still rather be us than anybody else. There is still no nation on earth that I would trade places with. I understand the negativity of American politics today. It's extensive, it's widely reported and communicated faster and more rapidly and wider than it's ever been reported before. But I think we make a terrible mistake if we teach our young people that they live in the worst time in human history, because it's just not true. We do face unique challenges, but we also have unique tools at our disposal to combat them. This is not the most divisive time in American history. I would venture to say the Civil War was very divisive. I would venture to say the 1960s placed extraordinary strains on our society. It is a time of great division. There is no doubt. But we have always been a nation that's faced great obstacles because what we do here is special. We remain the only place on earth that is trying to do what we are trying to do, and that is ensure that every single human being has the opportunity to live the life as they see fit. That's hard. It runs counter to thousands of years of human history, and that is why being America will always be hard. But I would not rather be anyone else. If I were given a choice to be alive at any place, at any time in human history, I would choose every single time to be a 21st century American. Because despite all the challenges we face, we are blessed with extraordinary resources. Most importantly of those resources are our people. And we need every single one of them. You see, we are engaged in an incredible global competition. In the case of China, we're the nation that has over 1 billion human beings. And this is not an anti-China speech. I think China and its people and its culture and its society has much to contribute to the world. They have 1 billion people, 3 times as many people as we do, which means we need everyone. We cannot afford to leave a single American behind. We cannot afford to stigmatize a single American because of who they come from, where they come from, how they worship, how their name is pronounced, where they were born, or who they were born to. I also remind people in closing that one of the most extraordinary things about America is that every single great cause in our history, as far as our society, was not despite our Constitution, but because of it. Every single extraordinary cause in American history, from the civil rights movement to women's suffrage to the end of slavery, were all a fulfillment of our founding promise. A nation that understood that what they were doing was not compatible with who we were created to be. That cause remains. The challenges are different. The progress has been made, but much remains to be done. It is the job of this generation to do what each generation before it did, and that is to continue to pursue the American idea that all men and women are created equal, because we are all endowed by our Creator with a right to life and to liberty and to pursue happiness, and to ensure that the world and the country and the life we leave our children and grandchildren is one that is even closer to full fulfillment of those ideas than the one that we inherited. And this cause is a critical component of it. For we cannot move forward if we take a single step back. And to allow and to accept hate speech in any form from anyone as an acceptable political viewpoint in this or any century would be a step back, not a step forward. And it would run counter to our ideas. And so, I thank you for your advocacy and for this invitation. And I look forward to continuing to work to highlight this issue on the floor of the Senate, in our homes, in our communities, in society at large. I thank you for your activism. You are the leaders on this issue, and it is our job to take your voice to the forums where we work. So I thank you so very much for this invitation and for this opportunity. Thank you, and God bless all of you. Thank you. Thank you.